Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final lecture for week 1. Over the past 7 videos, we've explored what leadership is, the characteristics of effective leaders, charismatic and transformational leadership, ethical decision-making, and communication. Next, we're going to bring all of these ideas together. This lecture is about moving from leadership theory to leadership practice. In other words, if you were promoted to a leadership position tomorrow, where would you begin? Leadership isn't just about understanding theories or being familiar with different leadership styles. At some point, every leader has to develop a plan, a roadmap for helping people and improving an organization. And that is exactly what we are going to discuss today. Today's lesson directly supports 2 of our course learning outcomes. First, you'll begin developing a strategic leadership plan designed to improve officer morale, operational efficiency, and public accountability. Second, you'll continue evaluating how leadership styles influence ethical policing and community trust. By the end of today's lecture, you'll have a practical framework that you can apply whether you eventually supervise a patrol shift, manage a correctional facility, lead an investigative team, or direct a criminal justice organization. Before we start planning for the future, let's briefly reflect on everything that we've covered this week. We've learned that leadership is influence rather than the simple authority. We've discussed the traits that build credibility, integrity, emotional intelligence, resilience, and accountability. We've explored charismatic leadership and transformational leadership. We examined ethical decision-making and leadership communication. Notice something interesting. None of our topics have focused on power. Instead, they focus on responsibility. And that is one of the most important lessons in leadership. Leadership is not about having authority over people. It is about accepting responsibility for people. So what exactly is strategic leadership? Strategic leadership means thinking beyond today's immediate problems. Good supervisors solve today's challenges. Strategic leaders prepare organizations for tomorrow's challenges. They're always asking questions like, where do we want this organization to be in 1 year? Where do we want it to be in 5 years? How do we prepare future leaders? How do we strengthen our organizational culture? How do we better serve our community? One thing I've learned through education and public service is that organizations rarely improve by accident. Improvement requires intentional leadership. It requires vision. It requires planning. And it requires people who are committed to continuous improvement. So, every leadership plan begins with understanding the problem. And that can sound simple. But it's one of the areas where leaders often make mistakes. Sometimes we address symptoms instead of causes. Imagine officer morale is declining. The symptom is low morale. But what is causing it? Why? Is it poor communication? Is it burnout? Is it staffing shortages? A lack of recognition? Is it inconsistent supervision? Effective leaders don't assume they know the actual answer. They investigate first. Throughout my career, one lesson has remained remarkably consistent. The first explanation is rarely the complete explanation. Good leaders ask questions before they propose solutions. So, once you've identified the problem, it's time to gather information. Talk to employees. Talk to supervisors in your organization. Most importantly, talk to community members and review all available data. Look for patterns rather than isolated incidents. One lesson teaching has reinforced for me is that different people often see the same situation differently. And that's a great thing. Students may experience a classroom differently than their instructor. Faculty may see challenges administrators don't immediately recognize. Community members may notice issues that government officials overlook. And that's why listening is one of the most valuable leadership skills that you can develop. Leaders make better decisions when they understand the issue from multiple perspectives. Now, after we've understood the issue, we've gathered our information, we need to establish a vision. A vision answers one important question: where are we going? Maybe your vision is reducing complaints. It is improving officer wellness. It is strengthening community partnerships, developing future leaders, improving training. Whatever the goal, effective leaders communicate it clearly. One thing I found in both education and governance is that people are much more willing to embrace change when they understand why the change matters. People don't simply want more work. They want meaningful work. They want a clear vision that gives them purpose for improvement. Now it's time to decide how to achieve the vision. There isn't one perfect leadership strategy. Different organizations require different approaches. You might establish a mentorship program, or perhaps improve supervisor training, or increase community engagement. Recognize, or maybe you need to recognize employee accomplishments more consistently, or expand leadership development opportunities. You could improve internal communication, or strengthen officer wellness initiatives. Notice something about this. Almost every effective strategy that we've discussed focuses on developing people, and that is intentional, because organizations become stronger because their people become stronger. People are your organization. Now that we've established all this, one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is assuming that improvement has occurred without actually measuring the results. So a good leader will ask, how will we know if this worked? Maybe employee satisfaction improves, but how do you measure that? Perhaps community complaints are decreasing. That's something measurable. Maybe officer retention increases. Training participation grows. Maybe public surveys show a greater trust in your agency. But data, it doesn't replace leadership. But what it does do is it helps leaders evaluate whether their efforts are making a difference. To establish continuous improvement, you have to have continuous evaluation. It is a cycle. So here's a scenario. Let's imagine you've been promoted to patrol lieutenant. Officer morale is low, and community complaints are increasing. Recruitment is difficult. Communication between officers and administration has broken down. Where do you begin? Take a moment and think about it. Many new leaders immediately start creating policies to make change. I am going to encourage you something different. Start by listening. Meet individually with your employees and meet with the community leaders. Take the time to learn before leading and making policy. One lesson public service has reinforced for me is that people are much more likely to support solutions when they believe that they've been included in the conversation. And listening to those individuals will create ownership, and ownership is going to create commitment to the changes that need to be made. So here's an activity for you, and you can put these comments in the below. So I want you to put yourself in the lieutenant's chair. And I want you to think through every dimension of leadership, not what you do, but the how and the why. So think about that problem that I had given you in the previous slide. Where do you start? Of all the issues that are raised, what is the single most urgent problem to address, and how would you identify it? What we've looked so far, what leadership style would you use? Would you lead with transformation? Would you use coaching, servant leadership, or a blend? Why? How would you communicate? What messages would you send to officers, to supervisors in your agency, and the community at large? And through what channels? That's important to think about today, because with social media, we have so many more channels than we've ever had to communicate. How would you build trust? What specific actions would demonstrate that you listen, that you act fairly, and that you follow through? And how would you measure your success? What data points and milestones would tell you and the team that the plan is working? And how often would you measure them? Building community trust. It's important to note, community trust does not happen through one singular event. It develops through thousands of consistent interactions with the community. Leaders strengthen that trust by being transparent. They listen respectfully. They communicate honestly. They follow through on their commitments. They treat everybody fairly. This trust, it grows slowly, especially in a community where trust has dissipated and the department has given the community reason not to trust them. This can disappear also very quickly after one bad incident. And that is why ethical leadership and communication remains so important, and why we have you take a course like this, so that you know how to address this. So leadership is continuous improvement. The strongest leaders are never going to declare victory and stop growing. They maintain a posture of ongoing inquiry, always asking what more can be done, what can be learned, and how can we make our organization stronger tomorrow than it is today. Outside of this course, if you're looking for resources on how to grow as a leader, I definitely recommend looking at Jocko Willink. He is a former Navy SEAL who's gone into leadership consulting. He has many free videos out on YouTube discussing leadership and leadership skills and leadership qualities. He also has written books like Extreme Ownership, which I would highly recommend as a leader, because it's going to help you figure out these questions that great leaders keep asking. What can we improve? What are we missing? What can we learn? And how do we develop the next leaders? So always be a student. And you can reach out to me as your instructor if you have any questions about other leadership books. So let's connect to our course outcomes again, because week one didn't just introduce concepts. This is building the foundation for everything that follows in this course. So you have evaluated leadership styles. You can now assess which approaches best fit different organizational contexts. You've communicated effectively. You've seen how to build community trust. You're learning how to improve morale and accountability and strengthen ethical policing. So now I want you to think about this reflection. Think about your future career, your goal. What type of leader do you hope to become? And you can build upon the reflection in the last video that asked about great leaders that you've worked under. Consider the supervisors and commanders who have influenced you positively or negatively. What model do you want to follow? And what will you do different? What values will guide your decisions? When you face a difficult call where the easy path and the right path often diverge, what's going to anchor you? Will it be integrity, fairness, service, or courage? And how will others years from now describe you as a leader? What do you hope they would say about you? So let's get some takeaways, right? We've got to connect this to everything we've studied this week. Leadership traits influence leadership style. Leadership style influences communication. Communication influences organizational culture. Organizational culture influences public trust. Public trust influences organizational effectiveness. As you can see from this, everything is connected. And that shows that leadership is not a collection of isolated theories. It is a system, and every leadership decision will affect the next one. So, as we conclude week 1, I'd like to share something I've learned throughout my career. I've had the opportunity to work in the legal profession, teach at several colleges and universities, lead academic programs here at Fremont, and serve as an elected official. Every one of these roles is different, but they've all taught me the same lesson. Leadership is not about titles. Leadership is not about authority. Leadership is not about having the loudest voice in the room. Truly, leadership is about service. It is about helping others succeed. It is about making difficult decisions with integrity. It is about listening before speaking. It is about earning trust rather than demanding it. And perhaps most importantly, it is about leaving every organization stronger than you found it. That is a leader that I continue to strive to become, and it is the kind of leader I hope this course helps you to become as well. Great job this week, guys.